The workshop smelled of sawdust and motor oil when my phone buzzed at 11:30 that Tuesday night. I wiped my hands on a rag and glanced at the screen. Laurel's message glowed back at me. "I'm at my sister's. Don't wait up." I stared at those 8 words for a long moment, then typed back, "I'm not alone either." The lie rolled off my fingers as easily as breathing. Truth was, I'd been alone in my workshop for 3 hours, rebuilding the carburetor on my old Chevy while nursing a beer that had gone warm an hour ago. But something about that text, the casual dismissal, the assumption that I'd just accept whatever story she fed me, made my jaw clench. My name is Jack Stroud, and I've been running Stroud Electric for 15 years in this god-forsaken town called Crow's End. It's the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do, where secrets spread faster than gossip at a church social, and where a man's reputation can make or break him. I built my company from nothing after my father passed, turning it into the biggest electrical contracting outfit in 3 counties. I'm good at reading people, good at solving problems, and apparently, I've been spectacularly bad at reading my own wife. The workshop door creaked open, and I looked up expecting to see Laurel's guilty face. Instead, Gwen stepped in, her dark hair catching the overhead light. My sister-in-law had always been the sharper of the 2 sisters, with eyes that missed nothing and a tongue that could cut glass when she wanted it to. "Working late again?" she asked, but there was something different in her voice, something almost friendly. "Apparently so," I said, setting down my wrench. "Thought you were having a girls' night with your sister." Gwen's smile was thin as paper. Plans change. That's when I knew. Not the details, not the whole ugly truth, but I knew something was rotten in the state of my marriage. Gwen had never voluntarily spent 5 minutes in my company without Laurel as a buffer. Now here she was, acting like we were old friends, while her sister was supposedly at her place. "She's not with you, is she?" I asked. Gwen's smile widened. "What makes you think that?" Before I could answer, headlights swept across the workshop windows. Laurel's Honda pulled into the driveway with the aggressive speed of someone who had something to prove. I heard the car door slam, then her heels clicking across the concrete like gunshots. She burst through the workshop door, her perfect blonde hair slightly mussed, her lipstick gone, and her eyes blazing with the kind of righteous anger that only comes from being caught in a lie. "So," I said, wiping my hands again and giving her my best smile, "how was your date?" The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Behind her, Gwen let out a sound that might have been a cough or might have been a laugh. Laurel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. What are you talking about?" she finally managed. I picked up my phone and showed her the screen. "Your text. I'm at my sister's." "Except your sister's been here for the last 20 minutes, and unless you've figured out how to be in 2 places at once, I'd say you've been somewhere else entirely." Laurel's eyes darted between me and Gwen, and I could practically see the wheels spinning in her head, trying to calculate her way out of this mess. She was beautiful. I'd give her that. Even now, caught red-handed in a lie, she looked like something out of a magazine, but beauty only gets you so far when the foundation underneath is rotten. "I can explain," she started. "I'm sure you can," I said. "You always could talk your way out of anything. Remember when you convinced the PTA that the missing fundraiser money was just an accounting error? Or when you told me that charge at the jewelry store was for my birthday present, even though my birthday was 6 months away?" Her face went from pale to flushed in seconds. How dare you? How dare I what? Ask questions? Pay attention? Notice that my wife of 12 years has been lying to me?" Gwen cleared her throat. "Maybe I should go." "No," I said, not taking my eyes off Laurel. "Stay. This concerns you too, doesn't it? Since you're apparently part of whatever game we're playing here." Laurel straightened her shoulders, and I saw her shift into attack mode. It was a familiar sight. When cornered, she always came out swinging. "You want to talk about games, Jack? Let's talk about how you've been checking up on me, following me around like some kind of stalker. Let's talk about how you've been going through my things, invading my privacy." "Your privacy?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Sweetheart, privacy went out the window when you started lying about where you spend your evenings. And as for checking up on you..." I pulled out my phone again and scrolled through the photos I'd taken over the past 2 weeks. "Let's just say that little gym on Maple Street has become very popular lately." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the old Chevy's engine ticking as it cooled. Laurel's face went through several shades of pale before settling on a sickly green. That's not what you think," she whispered. "Really? Because what I think is that you've been having an affair with Grant McGowan, the pretty boy trainer who runs that place. What I think is that you've been using your sister as an alibi while you sneak around behind my back. And what I think is that you've been planning to take me for everything I'm worth when you finally work up the nerve to file for divorce." Gwen made that sound again, definitely a laugh this time. Laurel spun on her, eyes blazing. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You were supposed to—" "Supposed to what?" I interrupted. "Cover for you? Help you plan your exit strategy? Funny thing about family loyalty, Laurel. Sometimes it runs in directions you don't expect. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I looked at Gwen, who was watching the whole scene with the fascination of someone observing a particularly interesting car wreck. "You want to tell her, or should I?" Gwen's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. "Oh, this is your show, Jack. I'm just here for the entertainment." Laurel looked between us, confusion replacing anger on her face. "Tell me what?" I walked over to my workbench and picked up a manila folder I'd been keeping there for the past week. "Tell you that your sister has been feeding me information for months. Tell you that I know about every late-night text, every lunch date, every lie you've told. Tell you that I've been 3 steps ahead of you since Christmas." I opened the folder and spread the contents across the workbench. Photos, printed text messages, credit card statements, receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, charges from places I'd never heard of, a complete timeline of my wife's double life, laid out like evidence in a courtroom. "You see, Laurel, you made one crucial mistake. You assumed I was stupid. You assumed I'd just keep going to work every day, paying the bills, maintaining the house, while you figured out how to trade up to a newer model. You thought I was just some dumb contractor who wouldn't notice his wife was planning to screw him over." Laurel stared at the papers, her face cycling through emotions like a slot machine. "Gwen, you... How could you?" "How could I what?" Gwen's voice was ice cold now. "How could I get tired of covering for your lies? How could I get sick of watching you treat a good man like garbage while you chase after some muscle-bound moron who's probably cheating on you too?" Grant isn't what?" I asked. "Faithful? Honest? Planning to leave his wife for you? Because I hate to break it to you, sweetheart, but Grant McGowan is about as trustworthy as a $3 bill. Ask him about the personal training sessions he's been giving to Jennifer Walsh. Or maybe ask him about the weekend trips to Boston with that redhead from the bank." The look on Laurel's face was almost worth the months of lies and betrayal. Almost. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Check his social media, check his credit cards if you can get access to them. Or better yet, ask him yourself. I'm sure he'll be just as honest with you as you've been with me." Laurel grabbed for the papers on the workbench, but I was faster. I swept them back into the folder and tucked it under my arm. "Those are private," she said. "No, those are evidence, and they're staying with me until I decide what to do with them." "What do you want?" The question came out as barely a whisper. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. She was still beautiful, still the woman who'd turned heads when she walked into a room. But now I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the way she was already working angles, already trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. "What do I want?" I repeated. "That's a hell of a question, Laurel. What I want is my wife back. What I want is the woman I married, the one who used to laugh at my jokes and didn't flinch when I touched her. What I want is 12 years of my life back, 12 years I spent building something with someone who was just marking time until something better came along." I paused, letting that sink in. "But since I can't have any of that, I'll settle for the truth, all of it, starting now." Laurel straightened up, and I saw her jaw set in that stubborn line I knew so well. "And if I don't?" I smiled, and from the way she stepped backward, I knew it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then we do this the hard way." The next morning started like any other, except for the part where I woke up alone. Laurel had spent the night in the guest room, and from the sounds I'd heard around 3 a.m., she'd spent most of it on the phone. Probably with Grant, probably planning damage control. I made coffee, scrambled some eggs, and sat at the kitchen table reading the local paper while I ate. The Crow's End Tribune wasn't exactly the New York Times, but it served its purpose. Local business news, high school sports, and most importantly, the social pages where Laurel's name appeared with religious regularity. Mrs. Jack Stroud organized the annual charity auction. Laurel Stroud spearheaded the PTA fundraising drive. The lovely Mrs. Stroud was seen at all those years of building her reputation as the perfect small-town wife, and she was about to watch it crumble like a house of cards. My phone rang while I was finishing my second cup of coffee. Eddie Crowell's name appeared on the screen, and I smiled for the first time in 12 hours. "Morning, Eddie." Jack, my friend, you sound surprisingly cheerful for a man whose world just imploded. Eddie had been my best friend since high school, back when he was just Eddie and not Crow. The nickname came later, after he joined the police force and developed a reputation for seeing everything and remembering it all. These days, he ran a small private investigation business out of an office above the hardware store, and he knew more dirt about Crow's End than the town cemetery. Who says my world imploded? Well, let's see. Gwen called me at 6 this morning, cackling like a witch and saying something about fireworks at the Stroud household. Then I got a call from Mrs. Tibbs. You know Mrs. Tibbs, lives 3 houses down from you, saying she heard shouting from your workshop last night around midnight. And then, just to make my morning complete, I got a very interesting call from someone who shall remain nameless, asking if I knew any good divorce lawyers. I set down my coffee cup. Laurel called you. Laurel called everyone, from what I can tell. She's in full panic mode, trying to control the narrative before it gets away from her. Unfortunately for her, she's about 12 hours too late. What do you mean? Eddie's laugh was like gravel in a cement mixer. Jack, my boy, you've been married to that woman for over a decade. Did you really think she could keep a secret in a town this size? Half of Crow's End has known about her and Grant for months. The other half was just waiting for someone to make it official. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How long have you known? About the affair? Since February. About you knowing about the affair? Since you started asking me to look into Grant's background 3 weeks ago. You're not as subtle as you think, partner. I closed my eyes and rubbed my forehead. Why didn't you say something? Because it wasn't my place, and because I figured you'd handle it when you were ready. The question now is, what's your next move? Before I could answer, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Laurel appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking like she'd slept about as well as I had. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing one of my old college sweatshirts, and for a moment she looked like the girl I'd married. Then she opened her mouth. We need to talk. Hold on, Eddie. I covered the phone with my hand. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Sleep well? Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't pretend this is some normal morning where we make small talk over coffee. You've destroyed everything, Jack. Everything we built together. I uncovered the phone. Eddie, I'm going to have to call you back. You sure? I can stick around if you need backup. I'm sure. But thanks. I hung up and looked at my wife. She'd moved to the coffee maker and was pouring herself a cup with hands that shook just slightly. When she turned around, I could see the exhaustion in her face, but also something else. Determination. Okay, I said. Let's talk. She sat down across from me, wrapping her hands around the coffee mug like it was an anchor. This doesn't have to be ugly, Jack. We can handle this like adults. Adults. I repeated the word like I was tasting something sour. Is that what adults do? Lie to each other for months, sneak around behind each other's backs, plan their exit strategies while pretending everything's fine? I never planned. Stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. We're past the point of lies now, Laurel. Way past it. So if we're going to talk, let's at least be honest with each other. She stared into her coffee for a long moment. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but I'd seen her cry on command too many times to be moved by it. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said quietly. Which part? The affair or getting caught? The tears vanished, replaced by a flash of anger. You want honesty? Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Grant. Yes, I've been lying to you about it. But this marriage has been over for years, Jack. We both know it. Do we? Because I thought we were just going through a rough patch. I thought maybe we needed to work on things, spend more time together, remember why we fell in love in the first place. Apparently I was the only one thinking that. When was the last time you really looked at me, Jack? Really saw me? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about the business, or the house, or some problem that needed fixing? When was the last time you made me feel like I was more than just another item on your to-do list? The question hit harder than I wanted to admit, because there was truth in it. We had grown apart over the years. We had stopped talking, stopped connecting, stopped being anything more than roommates who shared a mortgage. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. So, instead of talking to me about it, instead of suggesting counseling or trying to work on our problems, you decided to start screwing around with the local gym rat? Grant isn't... She stopped herself and took a deep breath. He makes me feel alive again. He makes me feel like I'm worth something. And I don't? Not for a long time. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I felt something shift inside me, some final thread of hope or affection finally snapping. Okay, I said. Fair enough. So what now? She leaned forward, and I could see the relief in her face. She thought she'd gotten through to me, thought she'd made me understand. Now we figure out how to end this with some dignity. We divide things up fairly, we don't drag each other through the mud, and we both move on with our lives. I nodded slowly. That sounds reasonable. I'm glad you, except for one small problem. Her face fell. What? I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the yard I'd spent 15 years maintaining, the garden Laurel had planted when we first moved in, the life we'd built together. The problem is that I'm not feeling particularly reasonable right now. The problem is that you've spent months making a fool of me in front of this entire town, and now you want me to just smile and pretend it's all okay. Jack, I turned around, and whatever she saw in my face made her stop talking. You want to know when I stopped looking at you, Laurel? It was when I realized you'd stopped looking at me. You want to know when I stopped making you feel worth something? It was when you decided I wasn't worth the effort of an honest conversation about our problems. I walked back to the table and sat down, leaning forward so she could see my eyes clearly. You made your choice. You chose to lie, to cheat, to plan your escape while pretending everything was fine. That was your choice, and you made it every single day for months. So what are you saying? I'm saying that you don't get to control how this ends. You don't get to decide that we'll do this quietly and amicably and with dignity. You gave up that right when you decided to screw around behind my back. The color was draining from her face again. What do you want? I smiled, and I could tell from her expression that it wasn't a reassuring sight. I want you to understand something, sweetheart. This is Crow's End. This is a small town where everyone knows everyone, where reputations matter, where what people think about you can make or break your life. You've spent 12 years building yourself up as the perfect wife, the pillar of the community, the woman everyone looks up to. I paused to let that sink in, and I'm about to watch it all come crashing down. She stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. You can't do that. You can't destroy my reputation just because you're angry. Can't I? Watch me. I'll fight you, Jack. I'll tell everyone what you're really like, how controlling you are, how you've been spying on me, invading my privacy. Go ahead, I said calmly. Tell them. Tell them how I noticed my wife was lying to me and decided to find out why. Tell them how I discovered she was having an affair and gathered evidence. Tell them how I confronted her with the truth and she tried to blame me for her own choices. I stood up and walked toward her. She backed away until she hit the kitchen counter. But while you're telling your story, I'll be telling mine. And I'll have photos and text messages and credit card statements and a dozen witnesses who saw you and Grant together. What will you have? I'll have Grant, she said, but her voice was barely a whisper. Will you? Because I'm betting that when push comes to shove, when this all becomes public and messy and complicated, Grant McGowan is going to run like a rabbit. He's got his own reputation to protect, his own business to think about. How long do you think he'll stick around when the going gets tough? I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes, could see her starting to realize just how precarious her position really was. This doesn't have to be a war, Laurel. But if you want to make it one, I'm ready. The question is, are you? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see her weighing her options, calculating her chances, trying to figure out her next move. Finally, she straightened her shoulders and looked me in the eye. Fine, she said, if that's how you want to play it. She walked toward the kitchen door, then turned back. But don't think you know everything, Jack. Don't think you're the only one with secrets. And with that cryptic warning, she was gone, leaving me alone with my coffee and the growing certainty that this was just the beginning. By noon, my phone had rung 6 times. Mrs. Tibbs called to ask if I needed anything from the grocery store, which was her way of fishing for information. My secretary called to tell me that Laurel had stopped by the office looking for me, which was odd since she never came to the office unless there was some kind of emergency. 2 of my regular customers called with sudden urgent electrical problems that couldn't wait until next week, which told me the gossip network was already buzzing and people wanted the inside scoop from the source. Eddie called to tell me that Grant's Jeep had been spotted at the diner on Route 9, which was interesting since the diner was 20 miles outside of town and not the kind of place you went unless you were trying to avoid being seen. And Gwen called to invite me to lunch. The Switchyard at 1 o'clock, she said. My treat. The Switchyard was the local bar and grill, the kind of place where the blue-collar crowd gathered to drink beer and complain about their jobs. It was also the unofficial headquarters of the Crow's End Gossip Network, which meant that having lunch there with my sister-in-law would be like taking out a full-page ad in the Tribune. I arrived 5 minutes early and found Gwen already there, sitting in a corner booth with a clear view of the entire restaurant. She'd chosen her spot carefully, close enough to be seen, far enough from other tables to have a private conversation. You look terrible, she said as I sat down. Thanks. You look great too. She smiled at that. A real smile this time, instead of the sharp-edged thing she'd been wearing lately. Sorry. I just meant you look tired. I am tired. It's been a long 12 hours. The waitress came over. Jenny Walsh, a local girl who'd graduated high school with Laurel and had never quite gotten over the fact that she'd peaked at 17. She took our orders with the kind of exaggerated friendliness that meant she was hoping to overhear something juicy. After she'd left, Gwen leaned forward and lowered her voice. So, how bad is it? How bad is what? Don't play games with me, Jack. I helped create this mess, remember? I know exactly what kind of ammunition you have on my sister, and I know exactly what kind of damage it can do. The question is, what are you planning to do with it? I studied her face, trying to read her motivations. Gwen had always been a puzzle to me, smart, sharp-tongued, and fiercely independent. She'd never married, never seemed to want the same things Laurel wanted, never played the social games that consumed so much of her sister's energy. Why did you help me? I asked. She was quiet for a moment, turning her water glass in small circles on the table. You really want to know? I really want to know. Because I was tired of watching her treat you like garbage. Because I was tired of covering for her lies and making excuses for her behavior. Because I was tired of watching a good marriage fall apart while she chased after some fantasy that was never going to make her happy. And? She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe, or regret. And because I've been in love with you for 10 years, and I was tired of watching her waste what I would have given anything to have. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said, trying to figure out how I'd missed something so fundamental. Gwen, don't. She held up a hand. Don't say anything. I'm not telling you this because I expect anything from you, or because I think this changes anything between us. I'm telling you because you asked, and because after everything that's happened, we might as well be honest with each other. Jenny Walsh appeared with our food, and we sat in silence while she arranged plates and refilled water glasses and tried to look like she wasn't listening to every word we said. After she left, I looked at Gwen again. How long have you known about the affair? Since it started, maybe before it started. I could see it coming from a mile away. And you didn't think to warn me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was just stirring up trouble between you and Laurel? She had a point. If Gwen had come to me 6 months ago with stories about Laurel and Grant, I probably would have dismissed it as sibling rivalry or jealousy. So instead, you decided to help me catch her. I decided to help you see what was right in front of your face. What you did with that information was up to you. I took a bite of my burger, chewing slowly while I thought. The switchyard was filling up with the lunch crowd, and I could feel eyes on us from several tables. By tonight, half the town would know that Jack Stroud had lunch with his sister-in-law the day after his marriage exploded. She threatened me this morning, I said quietly. Threatened you how? Said I didn't know everything, said I wasn't the only one with secrets. Gwen's expression darkened. What kind of secrets? I was hoping you could tell me. She shook her head. I don't know what she meant, but knowing Laurel, she's probably bluffing. She's desperate, Jack. Desperate people say desperate things. Maybe, or maybe she's got something I don't know about. Like what? I shrugged. I don't know. Financial stuff, maybe? Something about the business. Something about me. Gwen reached across the table and touched my hand. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it. Together. The simple gesture, her fingers on mine, sent a jolt through me that I wasn't prepared for. I looked into her eyes and saw something I'd been missing for years. Someone who actually cared about me, not just what I could provide or what I represented. I pulled my hand back gently. Gwen, I can't... I know. It's too soon, too complicated, too messy. I get it. She smiled sadly. But when this is all over, when the dust settles and the lawyers finish picking over the bones of your marriage, maybe we can figure out what comes next. Maybe, I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. We finished lunch in relative silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. As we were getting ready to leave, Jenny Walsh appeared at our table again. Everything okay over here? She asked, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. Everything's fine, Jenny, I said. Thanks for asking. Good. Well, I hope you know that if you need anything at all, you just have to ask. We all think the world of you, Jack. What's happening? It's just terrible. I felt a chill run down my spine. What's happening? Jenny's eyes went wide, like she'd just realized she'd said too much. Oh, I just meant, with everything that's going on? What's going on, Jenny? She looked around nervously, then leaned closer. Well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but Laurel was in here about an hour ago with Grant McGowan, and they were having what looked like a pretty intense conversation. She seemed really upset. I felt Gwen tense beside me. They were here? Together? Well, not exactly together. I mean, they sat at separate tables, but they kept looking at each other, and then she got up and went over to his table for a few minutes. It was all very dramatic. I pulled out my wallet and left money on the table, probably too much, but I was in a hurry to get out of there. Thanks for lunch, I said to Gwen as we walked toward the door. Jack, wait. She caught my arm. Don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Don't go looking for them. Don't confront them in public. Don't give them any more ammunition to use against you. She was right, of course. The smart thing to do would be to go back to work, go about my day, let them make the next move. But I'd been doing the smart thing for months while my wife made a fool of me, and I was getting tired of being smart. I'll call you later, I said. Jack. But I was already walking away, my mind racing with possibilities and plans. Laurel and Grant were getting sloppy, meeting in public, taking risks. That meant they were either getting confident or getting desperate. Either way, it was time to turn up the heat. I drove past the gym twice before I spotted Grant's Jeep in the parking lot behind the building. The same Jeep that had been parked at the diner an hour ago, according to Eddie. The same Jeep that had been parked at various motels and restaurants around the county for the past 3 months, according to my own surveillance. I pulled into the lot and sat in my truck for a moment, watching the building. McGowan's Fitness was one of those upscale places that catered to people who wanted to be seen working out more than they actually wanted to work out. All chrome and mirrors and expensive equipment, with a juice bar in the front and private training rooms in the back. Grant had opened the place 2 years ago with money from his ex-football career and a loan from his father-in-law. He was one of those guys who'd been a big fish in the small pond of high school athletics, had a mediocre college career, and never quite figured out what to do with himself afterward. The gym was his attempt to recapture some of that glory, to be the center of attention again. And apparently, screwing around with other men's wives was part of the business plan. I got out of the truck and walked toward the front entrance. Through the big plate glass windows, I could see the usual afternoon crowd, a few housewives on treadmills, some retirees lifting light weights, a handful of younger guys trying to impress each other with how much they could bench press. No sign of Grant. The girl at the front desk looked up as I walked in. She was maybe 22, blonde, and wearing the kind of tight workout clothes that were designed more for display than for actual exercise. Hi there, she said with a practiced smile. Are you interested in a membership? Actually, I'm looking for Grant. Is he around? He's with a client right now. Can I take a message? I'll wait. She looked uncertain. Well, he might be a while. Private sessions can run pretty long, you know? I smiled at her, the same smile I'd been giving Laurel lately. That's okay, I've got time. I found a chair in the waiting area and settled in to watch. The gym had a clear view of the parking lot, which meant I could see when Laurel's Honda pulled in 20 minutes later. She sat in her car for a few minutes, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror, then got out and walked toward the building. She was wearing yoga pants and a tank top that showed off the figure she worked so hard to maintain. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing every man in the room was watching her. She walked right past me without a glance, heading straight for the back of the gym where the private training rooms were located. The girl at the front desk didn't even look up from her magazine. Interesting. I waited another 10 minutes, then got up and walked toward the back of the gym myself. The private training rooms were down a short hallway, each one with a small window in the door. Most of them were empty, but the last one on the left had the blinds drawn. I could hear voices inside, low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. Angry, worried, desperate. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The conversation went on for about 5 minutes, then stopped abruptly. I heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, pretending to examine a piece of equipment near the water fountain. The door opened and Laurel came out, her face flushed and her jaw set in that stubborn line I knew so well. She walked quickly toward the front of the gym without looking around, and a moment later I heard the front door open and close. I waited another minute, then walked back toward the training room. The door was still open, and I could see Grant inside, sitting on a weight bench with his head in his hands. "Rough day?" I asked. His head snapped up, and the look on his face was priceless. Surprise, guilt, and fear all rolled into one expression. "Jack, what brings you here?" "Thought I might look into a membership," I said, stepping into the room. "I hear you offer very personal service." He stood up, and I had to admit he was an impressive physical specimen. 6'2", probably 220, with the kind of build that came from spending several hours a day in the gym. But all those muscles wouldn't help him if he didn't have the brains to go with them. Listen, Jack, I think there might be some misunderstanding. Oh, I don't think there's any misunderstanding at all. I think everything is perfectly clear. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos I'd taken over the past few weeks. Grant and Laurel in the parking lot of a restaurant across town, his hand on her lower back, her face turned up toward his. Nice picture, don't you think? Very artistic. The lighting is particularly good. The color drained from his face. Where did you get that? I took it. Amazing what you can see when you know where to look. He took a step toward me, and I saw his hands clench into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to take a swing at me, which would have been perfect. Nothing like a little assault charge to really complete the picture. But then he seemed to remember where we were, and that there were witnesses in the next room, and he took a step back. What do you want? He asked. What do I want? That's a great question, Grant. What I want is for you to stay away from my wife. What I want is for you to stop screwing around with other people's marriages. What I want is for you to find yourself a nice single woman and leave the married ones alone. It's not that simple. Sure it is. It's exactly that simple. You see a wedding ring, you walk away. Basic human decency. You don't understand. Laurel and I. Laurel and you, nothing. Laurel is my wife. She's been my wife for 12 years, and she'll be my wife until one of us decides otherwise. What she is not is your girlfriend, your lover, or your problem to solve. I took a step closer to him, close enough that he had to look up slightly to meet my eyes. But here's the thing, Grant. I'm not here to fight over her. I'm not here to defend my territory or prove my masculinity or any of that caveman nonsense. I'm here to give you some friendly advice. What kind of advice? I smiled at him, and I could see him tense up. The kind of advice that might save you a lot of trouble down the road. You see, Laurel has a way of making promises she can't keep. She has a way of making people believe things that aren't true. She has a way of getting people to do things they wouldn't normally do, and then leaving them holding the bag when everything falls apart. That's not... Let me finish. Right now, you think you're in love. You think you found something special, something worth risking everything for. You think Laurel is going to leave me and run away with you, and you'll live happily ever after. I could see from his expression that I'd hit the nail on the head. But here's what's really going to happen. This is all going to come out. And when it does, Laurel is going to do whatever she has to do to protect herself. She's going to throw you under the bus so fast it'll make your head spin. She's going to claim you seduced her, or pressured her, or took advantage of her vulnerable emotional state. She's going to make herself the victim and you the villain, and by the time she's done, you'll be lucky if you can get a job cleaning toilets, let alone running a business. You're wrong, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Ask yourself this, Grant. What has she actually promised you? Has she said she's going to leave me? Has she filed for divorce? Has she made any concrete plans for your future together? Or has she just been stringing you along with vague promises about someday and when the time is right? The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. She's using you, I said quietly, just like she's been using me. The only difference is that I'm finally smart enough to see it. I turned and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. Oh, and Grant, that conversation you just had with Laurel, the one where she was probably telling you to be patient, to keep quiet, to let her handle everything, you might want to think about whether she's really looking out for your best interests or just trying to buy herself time to figure out her next move. I left him standing there and walked back through the gym. The girl at the front desk looked up as I passed. Did you decide about that membership? She asked. I don't think this place is really my style, I said. But thanks anyway. I was almost to my truck when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw Grant jogging across the parking lot, his face red with exertion and anger. We're not done talking, he said. Sure we are. No, we're not. You can't just come into my place of business and threaten me. Threaten you? When did I threaten you? I gave you some friendly advice, that's all. Man to man, one businessman to another. You know what I mean. I opened the door of my truck and climbed in. Actually, I don't, but if you're feeling threatened by the truth, that's something you might want to think about. I started the engine and rolled down the window. By the way, Grant, you might want to be more careful about where you park that Jeep of yours. Small town like this, people notice things. People talk. I put the truck in gear and drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot looking like he'd just been hit by a freight train. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to see how they'd react. I didn't have to wait long. My phone started ringing before I'd even made it back to the office, and it kept ringing for the rest of the afternoon. Laurel called 3 times, but I let it go to voicemail. Gwen called to ask if I'd done anything stupid, and I told her I'd been a perfect gentleman. Eddie called to tell me that Grant's Jeep had been spotted speeding toward the county line, which suggested that my little chat had made an impression. But the most interesting call came from an unexpected source, Jennifer Walsh, the redhead from the bank that I'd mentioned to Laurel earlier. "Mr. Stroud, this is Jennifer Walsh from First National. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I heard there might be some trouble, and I thought you should know something." "What kind of something, Jennifer?" "About Grant McGowan, about some things he's been saying, some things he's been doing that you might want to know about." I pulled over to the side of the road. "I'm listening." "Well, he's been coming into the bank pretty regularly over the past few months, making deposits, moving money around. Nothing illegal, you understand, but unusual. Large cash deposits, transfers to accounts in other states, that kind of thing." "What kind of amounts are we talking about?" "I probably shouldn't say, but we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. More money than a small-town gym should be generating, if you know what I mean." I did know what she meant. Grant's gym was successful enough, but it wasn't exactly a gold mine. The kind of money Jennifer was talking about suggested either a very creative bookkeeper or some additional source of income. "Is there anything else?" I asked. "Well," she hesitated. "He's been asking questions about you, about your business, about your financial situation. He wanted to know about your accounts, your credit, that kind of thing. I told him I couldn't discuss customer information, but he was very persistent." "When was this?" "The last time was about 2 weeks ago, but he's been asking questions for months." I thanked Jennifer and hung up, my mind racing. Grant had been researching my finances, which meant this wasn't just about an affair. This was about money, which made everything more complicated and more dangerous. I called Eddie. "I need you to look into something," I said when he answered. "What kind of something?" "Grant McGowan's finances. Bank records, business records, tax returns if you can get them. I want to know where his money is coming from and where it's going." "That's going to take some time, and it's not going to be cheap." "Time I've got, money I've got. What I don't have is patience." "Fair enough. What's this about, Jack?" I told him about my conversation with Jennifer Walsh, about Grant's questions and his unusual banking activity. "Sounds like your boy Grant might have some secrets of his own," Eddie said. "Give me a couple of days." I was about to hang up when he stopped me. "Jack, be careful. If Grant's involved in something shady, and if he thinks you're getting too close, he might decide to do something stupid. Let him try. I'm serious. Desperate people do desperate things, and if this guy has as much to lose as it sounds like he does, he might not go quietly." I promised Eddie I'd be careful, but the truth was, I was past the point of being careful. Grant and Laurel had made their choices, and now they were going to live with the consequences. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the office, trying to focus on work, but mostly thinking about what Jennifer had told me. By 6 o'clock, I'd given up pretending to be productive and decided to head home. Laurel's car was in the driveway when I pulled up, which surprised me. After our conversation that morning and my visit to the gym, I'd expected her to make herself scarce for a while. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a glass of wine and a stack of papers spread out in front of her. "We need to talk," she said without looking up. "So you said this morning. How'd that work out for you?" She looked up then, and I could see that she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her makeup was smeared, and she looked older than I'd seen her look in years. "Please, Jack, just sit down and listen to me." Something in her voice made me pause. This wasn't the angry, defiant Laurel from this morning, or the calculating, manipulative Laurel I'd grown used to over the past few months. This was something else entirely. I sat down across from her and waited. "I know you went to see Grant today," she said. "Did I?" "Don't play games. He called me, told me what you said to him. He's scared, Jack. Really scared. He should be. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't how I wanted things to go." I looked at the papers spread out on the table. Financial documents, bank statements, legal papers I didn't recognize. "What are those?" She followed my gaze and then quickly gathered the papers into a stack. "Nothing, just paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" "It doesn't matter." I reached across the table and grabbed the stack before she could stop me. The top document was a loan application, filled out in Laurel's handwriting. The amount requested was $50,000. "What the hell is this?" "Jack, please." I flipped through the other papers. Bank statements showing large withdrawals from our joint accounts, credit card applications, a deed transfer document that would put our house solely in Laurel's name. "What the hell is this?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I can explain. You've been stealing from me. You've been draining our accounts, applying for loans in my name, trying to steal my house. It's not stealing if it's community property. I slammed the papers down on the table so hard that Laurel jumped back in her chair. Community property? We're not even separated yet, let alone divorced, and you're already dividing up the assets. How long have you been planning this, Laurel? How long have you been setting me up? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and your boyfriend have been planning to take me for everything I'm worth. She was crying again, but I was past the point of being moved by her tears. Grant needed money, she said quietly. For what? His business. He's in trouble, Jack. Real trouble. He owes people money, dangerous people, and if he doesn't pay them back, that's not my problem. I made it your problem. I've been helping him, giving him money from our accounts, co-signing loans. How much? She didn't answer. How much, Laurel? About $70,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $70,000. More than a year's salary for most people in this town. Money I'd worked 15 years to save. Money I'd planned to use for our retirement. For the kids we'd never had. For the future we'd never have. You gave him $70,000 of my money. Our money? My money. Money I earned, money I saved, money I trusted you to help me manage. And you gave it to your boyfriend so he could pay off his gambling debts, or his drug dealers, or whatever kind of trouble he's gotten himself into. It's not like that? Then what is it like? Because it sounds to me like you've been running a con game, using me as your mark while you and Grant planned your escape. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, trying to control my anger, trying to think clearly. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. It looked peaceful, normal, like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Where is he now? I asked without turning around. I don't know. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not about this. He left town this afternoon. After you talked to him, he panicked. He said he needed time to think, time to figure out what to do. What to do about what? About the people he owes money to, about you, about us. I turned around and looked at her. There is no us, Laurel. There hasn't been an us for a long time. What there is a woman who's been stealing from her husband to support her boyfriend's criminal activities. They're not criminal. Fraud is criminal. Theft is criminal. Forgery is criminal. And if you've been signing my name to loan documents, that's all three. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't what? Press charges? Turn you in? Protect myself from further theft? I walked back to the table and picked up the stack of papers. Here's what's going to happen, Laurel. You're going to tell me exactly how much money you've taken, where it went, and how we're going to get it back. You're going to close any accounts you've opened in my name, cancel any credit cards you've applied for, and reverse any transactions you can reverse. I can't. You can, and you will. Because if you don't, I'm going to take these papers to the police, to the bank, and to every lawyer in town. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been doing, and I'm going to make sure you pay for every penny you've stolen. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her options, trying to figure out her next move. And if I do what you want? She asked finally. Then maybe we can work something out. Maybe we can handle this quietly between us, without involving the authorities. What kind of something? I smiled at her, but there was no warmth in it. That depends on how cooperative you are, and how quickly you can find your boyfriend and get my money back. She nodded slowly, and I could see the defeat in her eyes. I'll need some time. You have 24 hours. That's not enough. Then you better get started. I left her sitting at the kitchen table and walked upstairs to pack a bag. I couldn't stay in the same house with her tonight, not after what I'd learned, not while I was this angry. But as I threw clothes into a suitcase, I found myself thinking about what Eddie had said earlier. Desperate people do desperate things. Laurel was desperate now, more desperate than she'd ever been. And Grant was somewhere out there, probably even more desperate than she was. Which meant this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the night at Eddie's place, sleeping on his couch and staring at the ceiling while I tried to figure out my next move. By morning, I'd made my decision. It was time to end this, once and for all. Eddie was already up when I stumbled into his kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that looked strong enough to wake anyone up. You look like hell, he said. Feel worse. Any word on Grant's financial situation? Some. Your boy's been busy. Multiple bank accounts, cash transactions, offshore transfers, the whole 9 yards. But here's the interesting part. Most of the money isn't going out. It's coming in. I sat down at his kitchen table and poured myself a cup of coffee. What do you mean? I mean, Grant McGowan isn't just some small-town gym owner with gambling debts. He's running some kind of operation, something that generates serious cash. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 2 years. What kind of operation? Still working on that. But whatever it is, it's not legal, and it's not small time. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. So when Laurel told me he needed money to pay off dangerous people, she was probably lying. Or maybe she doesn't know the whole truth. Either way, your $70,000 wasn't going to pay off debts. It was probably going into whatever scheme he's running. My phone rang before I could respond. Laurel's name appeared on the screen, and I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me. What do you want, Laurel? I found him. Her voice was tight, strained. I found Grant. We need to meet. Where is he? That's not important. What's important is that he has a proposition for you. I'm not interested in any propositions from Grant McGowan. Jack, please, just listen. He knows he made mistakes, and he wants to make things right. He wants to give you back your money, all of it, plus interest. In exchange for what? In exchange for you staying quiet about everything. No police, no lawyers, no public scandal. Just take your money and walk away. I looked at Eddie, who was listening to every word with the kind of expression he used to get when he was working a particularly interesting case. Where do you want to meet? I asked. The old warehouse district down by the river, Building 47, 1 hour. I'll be there. I hung up and turned to Eddie. Feel like taking a ride? Wouldn't miss it. But Jack... I know, it's probably a trap. Probably, it's definitely a trap. The question is, what kind of trap, and are you walking into it with your eyes open? I thought about that as we drove toward the warehouse district. The old industrial area had been fading for 20 years, ever since the textile mills closed and the jobs moved overseas. Most of the buildings were empty now, used for storage or left to decay. It was the perfect place for a private conversation or for something much worse. Building 47 was a 3-story brick structure that had once housed a furniture factory. Now it was just another empty shell with broken windows and weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. Laurel's Honda was parked near the front entrance, along with a black sedan I didn't recognize. Grant's Jeep was nowhere to be seen. You sure about this? Eddie asked as we pulled up. No, but I'm doing it anyway. We got out of the truck and walked toward the building. The front door was propped open, and I could hear voices coming from inside. I pulled out my phone and started recording, then nodded to Eddie. We stepped through the doorway and found ourselves in a large, empty room with concrete floors and exposed ceiling beams. Laurel was standing near the far wall, looking nervous and pale. Next to her was Grant, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. But it was the third person in the room who made me stop short. Vincent Torino was a name I knew from the newspapers, a mid-level organized crime figure who'd been operating out of Boston for the past decade. He was a thin, well-dressed man in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of cold eyes that suggested he'd seen too much and cared too little. Mr. Stroud, he said in a voice like silk over steel. Thank you for coming. I apologize for the dramatic setting, but privacy is important in situations like this. What kind of situation is this exactly? The kind where everyone gets what they want and nobody gets hurt. I glanced at Eddie, who had positioned himself near the door and was scanning the room for other exits. Old habits from his police days. I'm listening, I said. Torino smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Your wife's boyfriend here has been working for me for the past 2 years. Nothing too complicated, just moving money, making connections, providing certain services to certain people. He's been quite successful. What kind of services? The kind that generate substantial income, the kind that require discretion and loyalty, the kind that Mr. McGowan has been providing until very recently. I looked at Grant, who was staring at the floor like he wanted it to swallow him up. What happened? What happened, Torino continued, is that Mr. McGowan decided to get greedy. He started skimming money, thinking I wouldn't notice. He started making unauthorized deals, thinking he could go into business for himself. And most recently, he started talking to people he shouldn't be talking to about things that are none of their business. People like me? People like you, and people like your friend there by the door, who used to be a police officer and still has connections in law enforcement. Eddie tensed, and I saw his hand move slightly toward the gun he carried under his jacket. Now, Torino said, we have a problem. Mr. McGowan owes me a substantial amount of money, much more than the $70,000 your wife gave him, and he's created a situation that could be very damaging to my business interests if it becomes public. So, what do you want from me? I want you to forget this conversation ever happened. I want you to forget about Mr. McGowan's business activities. I want you to take your money, all of it, plus a generous bonus for your trouble, and go back to your normal life. And if I don't? Torino's smile got wider and colder. Then this becomes much more complicated for everyone involved. I looked around the room, taking in the situation. Laurel looked terrified, Grant looked defeated, and Torino looked like a man who was used to getting his way. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Your original $70,000 plus another $50,000 as compensation for your inconvenience. $120,000 cash, no questions asked. It was a lot of money. More than enough to start over, to rebuild what Laurel had destroyed, to put this whole nightmare behind me. But it was also dirty money, paid for with the proceeds of whatever criminal enterprise Grant had been running. I need to think about it, I said. I'm afraid thinking time is a luxury we don't have, Torino replied. This offer expires when you walk out that door. Then I guess it expires. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Torino's smile disappeared, and for the first time I saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. That would be very unwise, Mr. Stroud. Maybe, but it would be honest, and I'm tired of living with lies. I turned and walked toward the door, Eddie falling into step beside me. Behind us, I heard Laurel call my name, but I didn't turn around. We were almost to the door when Torino spoke again. Mr. Stroud, I think you should reconsider. I stopped and looked back. Torino had produced a gun from somewhere, a small silver automatic that looked almost delicate in his manicured hands. I really don't want to make this unpleasant, he said, but I have a business to protect. Jack, Laurel whispered, please, just take the money. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, maybe for the last time. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, but she was also a stranger, someone who'd been willing to steal from me, lie to me, and now put me in danger for the sake of a man who'd never deserved her loyalty. No, I said quietly. Jack, no, Laurel. I'm done. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with the games. And I'm done with you. I turned back to Torino. You want to shoot me? Go ahead. But you better make sure you get Eddie too, because if you don't, he's going to make sure every cop in New England knows about this conversation. Torino studied me for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he lowered the gun. You're making a mistake, Mr. Stroud. A very expensive mistake. I've been making expensive mistakes for 12 years, I said. What's one more? Eddie and I walked out of the building and didn't stop until we reached the truck. As we drove away, I could see Laurel standing in the doorway, watching us go. That was either very brave or very stupid, Eddie said. Probably both. So what now? I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago but never thought I'd use. FBI Boston Field Office, a voice answered. I'd like to report a crime in progress, I said. And just like that, it was over. The FBI raided the warehouse an hour later, but they found it empty. Torino, Grant, and Laurel were gone, along with any evidence of what had transpired there. But Eddie's recording of the conversation, combined with the financial records he'd uncovered, was enough to start a federal investigation into Grant's activities. Within a week, Grant McGowan was in federal custody, facing charges of money laundering, racketeering, and tax evasion. Vincent Torino disappeared back into whatever hole he'd crawled out of, but not before making it clear that he considered our business unfinished. And Laurel? Laurel filed for divorce and moved to Florida, where she took a job as a real estate agent and tried to rebuild her life. She sent me one letter, months later, apologizing for everything and asking if I could ever forgive her. I never wrote back. The town of Crow's End moved on, the way small towns always do. The gossip died down, new scandals took center stage, and life returned to something resembling normal. I kept running my business, kept living in the house we'd shared, kept trying to figure out what came next. And Gwen? Well, that's a story for another day. But as I sit here in my workshop on this cold October evening, rebuilding another carburetor and thinking about the choices we make and the prices we pay for them, I can't help but smile. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the truth really does set you free, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted.